I'm going to focus a little bit more on the Oracle of Seasons and Ages history in the next video, but a lot of it has to do with Oracle of Seasons. Long story short, Oracle of Seasons started life as a remake of the original Legend of Zelda game, scrapped in favor of making an original game. That game eventually became 2. The original prototype of the remake became Oracle of Seasons, while the game with the more original ideas became Oracle of Ages. However, I didn't play a lot of Oracle of Ages growing up. I mostly had Seasons in my Game Boy, and a friend of mine bought Oracle of Ages. We played, beat the games, traded to link the games together. So yeah, I've beaten both games, I just happen to be more nostalgic for Oracle of Seasons. That would be why I played it first. If you're wondering though, Link simply means if you beat one game, you can continue over to the other game through a long-ass password. This is the coolest thing back in the day, and it's still kind of cool today, though it can be seen as a way to make us buy 2 games for a complete adventure. Still, I absolutely love the idea, and this was my first introduction to 2D Zelda. Yep, out of all the 2D Zelda options, this was actually my first. In my defense, it came out around the time that I actually had a Game Boy Color, and it came out after Majora's Mask, so I was kinda hyped for it. I also remember loving the game and the concept. Using seasons to solve puzzles and explore the world was a really neat idea. However, over 20 years later, geez, I feel old, does this game still hold up? I guess this is the main question today, so let's get this started. Let's take on General Onox! So, the story begins and Link just kind of shows up in a country called Holodrum. He is unconscious and found by Din, a gypsy dancer type character. After Link wakes up and dances a bit, General Onox attacks and steals the girl away. See, Din is the legendary Oracle of Seasons. Onox also buries the Temple of Seasons. Okay. You are instructed by Impa to visit the Great Maku Tree, a guardian tree in a nearby village. There you'll find the 8 plot devices, the essences of nature, or rather you're sent on a quest to go find them anyway. It is here I start really losing interest in the story, if I'm going to be honest. Other than the Maku Tree being weakened due to the seasons being out of sorts, there is no real reason given for the essences. And speaking on the seasons, before the seasons went haywire, Onox had to bury the Temple of Seasons first. You do eventually find the temple and the spirits of the seasons. Oh boy. After talking to them, you get the ability to change seasons on stumps with a rod. So what exactly is controlling the seasons? The Oracle? The spirits of the seasons? The essences of the seasons? Are they all the same thing? Who knows? The game doesn't seem to know, and I probably wouldn't question it too much if the plot went anywhere. Don't get me wrong, Link does stuff, but it is more or less that you are pointed in general directions over anything with the Maku Tree, giving you hints after every dungeon. I suppose the issue is none of this feels like an organic story. The character writing does little help in that situation, but it does actually help. It shows Din's personality rather well. Link seems to have a bit of a personality for a silent 8-bit protagonist, and there is a bit of a cast of cute characters. In both games you have animal buddies who, while being kind of one note, are pretty charming regardless, and then here you have the Sub-Rosa people who are quirky as all hell. Sub-Rosa is an underground world of sorts, which is where the Temple of Seasons ended up. The citizens are very weird. They love lava, trade in ore instead of rupees, and their culture is rather unique. I like them. You even date a unique one that gives you a season back under your belt. Cool. There's this pirate captain who's also odd. He's a bit one note, but he has connections to the next game, which is really cool. Sadly, General Onox is the only real sour point on the characterization. He is horridly one note, just looking for destruction, and then it finally gives him more purpose at the end. When you finally defeat him and, take him out, the game informs you that he works for the Gerudo Witches, and that destroying the land's seasons lit some type of flame of destruction. I mean, okay, but Onox didn't really do anything most of the game. That subplot comes from time to time about the flames of destruction. Other than it being related to a returning twin Rova, this doesn't resolve anything in the game, and you'll need to see Oracle of Ages review to see the conclusion of that. Overall though, while the character writing is simple, it works well with the style of game. I can't say that about the plot, however. This game does look great, however. Running off the same engine as Link's Awakening, this has very similar sprite quality as well as music quality. The sprites look great though. The bosses are mostly revamped boss fights from the original Zelda game, but made to look more identifiable. The main bad guy, General Onox, has a perfectly fine design, but his final form looks amazing on this game. Din's design is also very nice, and the Subrosia people have a simple but charming design. The Gorons even show up here and look pretty decent, and the locations are all identifiable, making it more difficult to get lost, though there is a map function in case you do. The music is actually pretty good for the hardware anyway. When playing Game Boy games, I actually rarely have the sound of the dang thing on. Normally I find it interrupts anything else I'm doing, but I still remember most of these tracks pretty fondly despite doing this often as a kid. Even ones I don't recognize sound pretty great overall. From animal, villager, monster designs, as well as good music, this game is charming as all hell. One of the better parts is that, while each area looks unique enough to mostly stand out, there is a unique look to each area for all 4 seasons. Spring looks faded but colorful, summer is bright and vibrant, fall has orange and brown, and winter has whites and browns. The game looks and sounds great. But I'm also sure you're wondering how it plays, too. See, this is where things get a little tricky, and compared to Link's Awakening, a lot. The original Link's Awakening gameplay is almost identical to the Oracle games. Of course, I'm talking the original Link's Awakening, but there's a huge flaw to that in all the Oracle games as well. See, on the Game Boy, there's only actual 2 buttons. Everything, and I mean everything, is mapped to these 2 buttons. When you want to jump with the Rock's Feather, you have to pause and map the item to one of the 2 buttons. Want to pick up jars? Map it. You want to use the shield? Map it. Hell, the sword is one of these items too. If you have to combine 2 of these items, you have to swap out your sword and most likely swap it right back in when you're done doing the one thing. This breaks pacing into such small pieces that most people will actually be turned off immediately. Unfortunately, hardware limitations really are shit sometimes. However, if you can get past this obstacle, and yes, this happens a lot, you will find some rewarding gameplay. The Rock's Feather, or the upgrade, the Cape, allows you to jump. The Slingshot and Hyper version are fun long-distance weapons with various bullets. See, towards the beginning of the game, you actually get a satchel where you get a bunch of seeds. These seeds each have different abilities. Fire, warping, speed boost, one of them attracts enemies, mystery seeds. You can either use them on yourself or fire them. And when you get a slingshot, you can fire a lot of them. You can find a bracelet that lets you lift things, flippers to swim, boomerang to collect items and stun enemies, which is later upgraded to be controlled mid-flight and actually hurt enemies. Bombs and a shovel return to find hidden goodies. A magic potion replacing fairy collecting as it heals you when you die. And last, the coolest toy in this game, the magnetic gloves. You can either attract yourself to special objects or repel yourself from them. This is really fun. Then there's the animal buddies. You get to summon one with a flute to get around certain areas, but you eventually have to control all 3 at some point in the game. Ricky is a kangaroo who can jump cliffs, shoot small tornadoes, and punches anything. Moosh is a blue-winged bear which can go over large gaps and slam down on enemies. Dimitri is a non-evil Dodongo who swims up waterfalls and eats monsters. Depending on which one is your buddy, the overworld will change in certain parts for you to actually need their help, before items almost replace them entirely. Lastly, the Rod of Seasons. This rod is useless in combat outside of one fight, but it can change the seasons if you're on a tree stump. It's not used in dungeons, but it's definitely used to get around the overworld in a lot of unique ways. So the overworld has 4 different seasons associated with each area. With the seasons out of alignment, you never know what you're going to get in different areas. To get to a dungeon, it is normally a matter of unlocking a new season for the job. After figuring out how to use your current season, it helps you in the area that you're in. Winter brings snow, kills some of the trees and makes them smaller, and freezes water. Summer has a nice tendency to dry out a lot of the water areas and brings vines. Fall allows some mushrooms to be moved and covers holes with leaves. Spring makes some flowers movable and makes certain type of flowers spit you into the air. This all comes together to make the overworld very interesting to solve and traverse. There is actually a second overworld in the form of Subrosia. It is a large lava world that, part of getting the seasons, because that's where the Temple of Seasons is, as I previously mentioned. There are portals you can find to bring you to different towers in the Temple of Seasons, This place also has a shop with some good merch and their own currency. After all that, you can finally enter a dungeon. The dungeons are more straightforward than some from Legend of Zelda series, but they work pretty well. All but one of the bosses are from the very first Legend of Zelda game, with a unique and new tactic to destroy them, and the dungeons are mostly simple, skill-based challenges to deal with. Simple doesn't mean bad, mind you. These levels work rather well, with the more taxing puzzles being in the overworld. That works for me. The final boss, however, gets to be a bit rough. Onox isn't too bad when he is more or less a big guy with a flail, or using Din as a human shield like a coward. And yes, this is the only time you use the Rod of Seasons in battle. Smacking Din out of the way, to make sure she's safe, that way you don't cut into her. No, it is his final form. Link is awkward when he is in a 2D space. This happens once or twice testing your patience and skills, but it feels awkward. Link is designed to move in all 4 directions, not in 2. This makes Onox's awesome-looking dragon form fairly difficult to deal with. Still, overall, this is a fun world to explore. Now for all the actual treasure you can find. Naturally, pieces of heart and heart containers return. It's pretty standard Zelda fare at this point. 4 pieces gives you an extra heart on your health bar, and a container for beating a boss does the exact same thing. You can do a massive trading side quest to get a better sword, and find special ore in Subrosia to get a better shield. You can find plant seeds and special soil patches to give you more goodies, and run into a witch named Maple who drops your treasure, as well as yours, and you get erase her to get better items. Most side quests will reward you with a seed or a ring. The rings give you different powers, and you can wear them to, decrease damage, or change Link into different characters. Okay, not all the rings are useful, but they are fun to find. You can upgrade the amount you can wear at one time, too, with, the amount of seeds and bombs you can hold. You can upgrade quite a bit. The coolest secret comes from the story. Twin Rova from Ocarina of Time actually shows up and keeps telling you how useless you are. Even after slaying General Onox, his destruction of the seasons, however brief, lights some mysterious flame. What does this mean? Well, this is where the password links come in. If you don't own both Oracle of Seasons and Ages, then this means absolutely nothing. If you played Ages first, well, this all happens in this game instead, and all the, secrets that I'm talking about happen in the last game. When you beat one of the games, you can continue the overall story in the other game through a password system. Now, if you do have both games, this gets really interesting as you can now upgrade even more things. If you get passwords from Oracle of Ages, or whatever game you played second, you can get bomb chews, more space for seeds or bombs, and an extra heart container. You can even upgrade your sword and shield more and get the big Goron sword, which is a massive 2-handed sword with a huge long reach. This is an interesting way to promote you to have 2 games, but I don't think it's important enough to diminish the quality of just having the one game. There's plenty of secrets and things to do in Oracle of Seasons without passwords from Oracle of Ages. Oracle of Seasons is a perfectly fine game. It isn't perfect by any means, and I have some major issues with the writing and some of the gameplay. However, everything mostly checks out and makes for a fun portable Zelda game. This game is good. Nothing to rush out and buy, but I think you should try it at some point in time if you have the chance. Assuming adventure games are your thing, or if you're into Zelda but never played these before. A solid 7 out of 10. As stated before, the password system and the season changing mechanics are really creative, and I hope the ability to change the seasons for puzzle solving is revisited at some point in time. However, getting this game officially isn't all that easy. The only 2 places to get this game, as well as Oracle of Ages, is on the original Gameboy Color or the Virtual Console for the 3DS. Sadly, the 3DS Virtual Console may not be accessible after a while. I wouldn't blame people for pirating this and other Game Boy games if I'm going to be honest. Only if you don't have a 3DS or Game Boy, though. Don't pirate games that are new or ones that you can get on a console you already have. Please? Anyway, next week we are tackling Oracle of Ages. Sounds like Varan isn't the only threat on that front, but I'll deal with that when the time comes. Until then, hit that like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications since YouTube hates new YouTubers, and stay tuned for more reviews. Take care, my minions!